Okay, so for those of you who weren't able to make it to the tech talk, we're going to go over quickly what we're going to be doing this semester in the tech talks. Today we'll be talking about REST APIs and MongoDB. So if you haven't already, install Node.js on your computer and also create a MongoDB account on mongodb.com. And as soon as you do that, be ready to go. So like I said, today we'll talk about REST APIs, what they are, and also MongoDB a little bit. The project that we'll be working on will have 4 tech talks, and each one building part of this Pizzilla app. So our project is for Pizzilla Pizzeria. The project is that they're short-staffed, customers need to be able to order by themselves, and they are looking for a software solution to be able to do it. So what we're going to be building is an app that can run on some iPads right here at the front of the store. Customers can walk up, place an order on an iPad, and then kitchen employees will receive and be able to manage orders in the back. So the system that we're going to be building this with is MongoDB as our database, Node.js as our web server, Express as a library that sits on Node.js and that we use as our web server, and then React app that will be on the iPads. So like I said, the database will be MongoDB, the API will be Node.js and Express, and then our user interface will be React. So we're going to talk a little bit about what an API is. So if this can right here is our database, and we want to let people see our data. So if we have, in this example, maybe pizza orders. We have this guy, he wants data. He just comes right into our database, gets what he wants. And that isn't really how we want to do it. It's not very secure to let people just access our database. And so what we do for that is we set up an API, which is an intermediary between a database and people or web browsers, anyone that wants to get access to our data, and we can control what data they get out of our database. So an API stands for an application programming interface. So it's that interface between our database and other people's applications, pretty much. So APIs come in kind of 3 varieties. When they first came about, SOAP was the main architecture that people used. Nowadays, it's very outdated and bulky. It used XML as the language that it would return things in. REST quickly became more popular to address all of the issues with SOAP. It's by far the most popular today, and it's really easy to set up and understand. GraphQL is one that you'll start to hear about more. It was built by Facebook and released in 2015, and it's really good for a large variety of data. When you have data that isn't necessarily related, it's easy to make very complex queries in one call. But today we'll talk about REST APIs. So REST API stands for representational state transfer. And basically that breaks down to 4 principles that your API needs to live by. First of all, it needs to be stateless, meaning that the server doesn't need to remember who you are. So with every request that you send, all the information that the server needs to know about you is inside that request. It doesn't have to have any memory of things that you've done in the past. Second of all, it represents the data that you're going to be getting back. So in a minute, we'll talk about different endpoints, and the data that you get back from those endpoints needs to be representative. Third is that it follows correct HTTP methods, which again, we'll talk about in a second. So like get, post, put, and delete are all different HTTP methods, and it needs to follow those correctly. And then last, there should be addressable resources. So /order will return things about orders, /customer will return things about customers. HTTP methods are different ways that you can make a request. So a GET request is the simplest of them. Every time we go to a website in a web browser, we're making a GET request. We're asking the server to get this page, and it's the same in an API. We're going to have different methods that we can use to do different things. So a get method, as you can imagine, would be like a read operation. It will get an item or get all items associated with a certain endpoint. So example over here, we get all users, or get users, we'll get all the users. If we get users /26, we want the user with the ID of 26. The post HTTP method is associated with the create of CRUD operation. We want to create a new item when we post. So if we post to /users, we want to create a new user. If we do a put HTTP method, that maps to, or that is associated with an update. So if we put /users /26, we want to update some information about the user with the ID of 26. And last, delete is obviously deleting an item. So if we delete users 20/26, we want to delete a user with the ID of 26. And these are all things that you can define when you set up your API, but you want to live by, or you want to set it up so that each HTTP method is correctly doing what users would expect it to do. So Weather API is, I just want to show you an example of a public API that you can use. So I'm going to open up Postman right here. This is an app that you can use to test out your API. It's a free app that you can download. And we're going to do a GET request on https://www.metaweather.com/API/location. I'm just going to type this in here so you can see location/44418. And if we do click send and do a GET request to their API, we can see we get back weather. I believe this is for Salt Lake City. You can look down here. Nope, this is for England. So we can see consolidated weather. We can see the time, the sunrise, the sunset. So this is all stuff that's in their database that they're letting us access through their API. So /API/location 44418. So we would expect to get information about a location with ID 44418 when we go to this API address. Great. So that is just one example of many of the REST APIs that are out there publicly available for you to use in your app. So specifically talking about the app that we'll be building, Pizzilla, APIs kind of use models like you've seen. So this one that we looked at over here used a location model. In the examples before, we used a user model or a customer model. And so in this Pizzilla app, we're going to be using primarily an order model that has attributes like which customer is ordering it, the pizza size, the pizza toppings, the price, the timestamp when it was ordered, and the status of the order. And when we did it live, we also talked about a customer class. We're going to actually cut that out just to make it a little bit more simple. So we're just going to be focusing on the order model. So our REST API endpoints that we're going to be building all are for the order model. The resource endpoint is going to be /orders. So a get method on order is going to get us a list of all pizza orders. A get on a specific ID will get us info about a specific order. When we post to orders, we want to create a new pizza order. And when we do a put request to a specific ID, we want to update an order. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. MongoDB is going to be the database that we're using for this. It is, if you haven't ever used it before, it's pretty easy to pick up. If you've used SQL or anything like that, it is a database just like this. One difference is that it is a document-based database, which means that the database has collections instead of tables and documents instead of records. So it is structured similarly, but it is a lot different in the way that it handles it internally. But you can think about it, if you're used to SQL, as a collection being a table and documents just being part of a record. And yeah. So let's move over to setting up our API. One last note before we do though. The way we'll be setting it up today is kind of a bare bones API that we'll build just to kind of see how it works. But if you were going to actually make an API for a company that you're working for or for a project that you're building, it'd be worthwhile to look into a service like IBM's Loopback or this open source project called Strapi that do the same things that we're going to be building today, but it's all behind the scenes and they have a lot more things set up. So that's worth looking into. So the steps to start, first of all, create a new folder somewhere on your machine, open up a terminal in that folder and a code editor as well. And you're going to type npm init-y to set up your project, to initialize it. And then we want to type npm install --save express mongoose, and actually one more as well, cores. So type those in and get started. I'll come over here and we'll get started as well. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it API. Zoom in a little bit here. And a new terminal. I'm going to do npm init-y. And that will set up a new package.json for me, which will tell me some information about my project. And then I'm going to do npm install --save express mongoose and cores. Perfect. So that's installed. You'll see that, you'll notice that it gave us a node modules folder now. This is where all of these libraries are stored. You don't have to ever really worry about what's in there. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up we're going to create a file. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the screen sharing thing here. Okay, we're going to create a new file in our API folder, and we're going to call it app.js. That did not. That put it inside the node modules folder. Don't want it inside the node modules folder. So click on API and then new file app.js. So inside this app.js is where we're going to set up our node app. The first thing that we want to do is we want to bring in the frameworks that we need. So we're going to say const express equals require express, const mongoose equals require mongoose, and const cores equals require cores. So these are the three frameworks that we're going to be using in our node app. And second, we want to actually set up our MongoDB connection. And Mongoose is the library that we'll be using to connect to MongoDB. So let's set up this default Mongoose connection. So what we're going to do is we're going to say const MongoDB equals, we're just going to put an empty string in there for now. So we're going to go get our Mongoose connection string in a second. And we'll say mongoose.connect, and then we'll give it this string. So we'll say MongoDB, and Yeah, we'll do that for now. So now we need to go and actually get our MongoDB set up. So notice you have that MongoDB account that you made. So here's my account. I'm already set up, but what you're going to do is you're going to click build a new cluster. You're going to pick your provider. We're going to do AWS because we always do AWS. You click whichever tier you want it. So I did mine in Oregon because that's closest, or Northern California. You can really do it in any of these, but these are where the free tier ones are available. You're going to want to make sure that your cluster tier is M0 sandbox. That'll be available for you. I'm already maxed out on those, but click M0 sandbox, and then you want to give your cluster a name. So I name it Pizzilla or something along those lines. Click done. It'll come out here and it will load for a minute and set up. And then what you're going to want to do is do two things. First, we need to make our database available so that we can access it. So click network access over here on the side. You're going to click add an IP address. And then what we want to do is click add current IP address and click confirm. Alternatively, you can also type in 0.0.0.0, and that will let it be available from anywhere, /0, confirm. So if you want it just to be available from your current IP address, click a current IP address, or you can type in 0.0.0.0, and that is anywhere. So what we're going to do is now that we have our network access set up, we need to click on database access and add a new user that will be able to access our database. So right now I have Pizzaman set up. We're going to set up another one. So click add a new user over here on the side, and then enter your username. So we'll say Pizzaman2. You can enter whatever you want here. And then let's enter a password of go get pizza or something similar. So click add user. Just make sure you remember that password and username. So we have Pizzaman and Pizzaman2. Now at this point, this is deploying changes to this because we edited some things, but you're going to click connect here where it says next to metrics and collections. Click connect and say connect to your application, and it will give you this big long string which we want to copy. So you can click copy and then move back over to your code and just paste that right into this empty string MongoDB. You'll notice it's a URL to be able to connect to your database. So there's a spot in here for a username and a password. So delete the username, including these little brackets, type Pizzaman2, and the password that we just set is go get pizza. So what this is saying is this is connected to a MongoDB server with the username Pizzaman2, password go get pizza, at Pizzilla m9xet.mongodb.net, which is the URL that they give us to connect there. And it's saying connect to the database test. That's one thing we want to change. So we don't want to connect to the test database. We want to connect to the pizza database. You can actually write any name here and call it whatever you want, and it will create a new database in your database cluster for you. So once we have that set up, it's as simple as that. Our app is connected to MongoDB. There is one thing that we need to do. Put a comma after MongoDB in this connect method and make a new object. And inside of here, we're just going to say use new URL parser and set that to true. And that's just camel case. So N, U, and P are all capital. And we're going to set that to true. And what that does is it lets Mongoose know that we're using the new type of URL. Next, we're going to set up our Express app. So we're going to say const app equals Express and const port equals 3001. So we're going to run our Express app on port 3001. So when you go to localhost port 3001, you'll be able to get to our app. So Express doesn't actually have anything by default that it gives out. You need to tell it where you want, what endpoints you want to expose or what you want to have out there. So right now this is a web server that doesn't do anything. There's no way to access it. We need to tell it how to access it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another file under API, and we're going to call it routes.js. And inside of here, inside of routes.js is where we're going to put our routes, or we're going to tell Express what to look for or what to open up to. That's not a good way of explaining it, but you'll see in a minute. So first of all, we want to bring in Express so we can use it. So we'll say const Express equals require Express. And then we'll set up the router. So we'll do const router equals express dot router with a capital R, router. And what a router does is it allows you to set up routes. So if we type router with a lowercase r now, dot get parentheses slash test, like that. This says anytime someone does a get method to the slash test endpoint, we want to run this function. And we'll give it a function, and Express always passes this function three things. It's the request object, the response object, and the next function. So inside of here, we're just going to put a response.send hello. So that will say anytime someone makes a GET request to slash test, send them back hello. So one last thing that we need to do is we just need to export this router from the file so that we can use it. So we will say at the very end of the file, module.exports equals router. And then when we come back over here to our app.js, we can bring in the routes. So we can say const routes equals require dot slash routes.js. So what that does is it goes in, looks for a routes.js file, which is right here that we just built, and assigns it to this routes variable right here. Now that we have our routes, we need to tell Express to hook them up. So we'll say app.use, and what we want to do is actually put all of these routes that we're going to make, we want to stick them onto the slash API endpoint. So that means that all of these will be accessible through the slash API. So it will be slash API slash test. And that's a good way of just keeping it separated and letting everyone know that this is an API that they'll be calling. And we'll say routes right there. So app use routes, and we'll put that onto the API. We'll mount that onto the API endpoint. One last thing we need to do. So once we mount the routes, is just to tell the app to listen. So app.listen, and listen on the port that we told it to up here. So on port 3001, and then we just are going to set up a function to let us know that it's listening. So this is a fat arrow function syntax. So it's just two parentheses, an equal sign, a greater than sign, and then the curly braces, and that opens up the function. Then we can just say console.log, and let's say Pizzilla app Pizzilla API rather is listening on port, and then we'll do this template syntax. So these are backticks, not quotes. This is left of the one key on your keyboard up in the corner, and then do the money dollar symbol and curly braces, and then you can put a variable inside of there. So let's see if we can run this and see if we didn't forget anything. So let's do down here in your terminal, type node space app.js. Okay, here we go. That's Pizzilla API listening on port 3001. Perfect. So like if you remember, I said the browser defaults to using a GET request. So if you go to localhost now, or port 3001, so you do this colon and then 3001, it'll say cannot get because we are actually on /API/test. And then here we say, so if we go to localhost colon 3001 /API/test, we get hello. And we got that from this get/test, and we're sending a hello, and this is in our routes file. So you see we have our Express app that just kind of sets up the web server, and then the routes that we mount onto this API endpoint tell the browser what it can, or tell the web server what browsers can look for and what to do when they get there. So we have this test function set up, and now we're going to start setting up actually our model and then our API. Okay, so if you remember, these are our REST API endpoints that we're going to be setting up. So first we need to set up our model and tell Mongoose, which is going to be talking to our database, what each order is going to look like. So how we're going to do that is we're going to open up our API folder. We're going to create a new folder inside of there, and we're going to call it models. Now inside this models folder, we're going to create a new file and call it order.js with a capital O, order.js. And inside of here, this will be where we define our model. So the first thing we need to do is we need to require Mongoose. So we'll say const mongoose equals require mongoose. Next, we'll go ahead and set up our schema. And our schema is just what should an order record look like in our database. So what we're going to say is we're going to say constant order schema equals new mongoose.schema. So now in here, so we have parentheses and then an object, and inside this object, we're going to tell it what fields we'll be expecting in an order. So first of all, we're going to be looking for a customer. And this customer, we're just going to simplify things and make it be the name of the customer. Previously, I talked about it being a foreign key to another model, but just to simplify things, because we don't have long to build this, we're going to make it just the customer's name. Next, we're looking for a size of the pizza, which will be a number, the toppings, which will be an array, the status of the pizza order, which will be a string, the price of the pizza, which will be a number, and then the order timestamp. And we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to make this an object and we're going to say type date, and then default to date.now. Make sure you don't put parentheses on the now, otherwise it won't work. Just do date.now. And what that does is it says order timestamp will be of type date, and every time you make a new order schema record in the database, make the default be to the date.now, so we don't ever have to deal with setting this manually. It'll just do it automatically. So once we set that schema up, we need to compile it into a mongoose model. So we'll say const order equals mongoose.model, and we'll name it order, and then we'll give it the order schema. So in order to compile a model, you just need to give it a name, it's a string, and then give it the schema that we just set up here above. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to export it. So module.exports equals order. So we get this order variable that we just set up, and we export it out of the file so that we can use that model elsewhere. So let me put it in the comments here. So that's it for our model. So now let's close that, and we'll come back over here to our routes file. So the first thing we need to do is, after we set up our router up here at the top, we need to actually bring in our models now that we've set up. So a new line, const order equals require, and then you're going to do quotes, and you'll say /models to look inside the models folder, and then you'll grab order. So that'll get the order file that we just made, the order model, and assign it to the order variable. And let me put in these other functions or these other comments here so that we can keep track of this. So this is our test file. We'll keep this just so you can remember what's going on. But now we're going to start setting up our endpoints that will deal with our order. So the first one that we're going to do is just our get orders. And what this does is it returns all of the orders. So what we're going to do is we're going to say router.get, just like above with the test one, /orders, and then we're going to mark, well, we'll do this as a function, and remember it has those 3 parameters that go inside the request object, the response object, and then the next function. And we're going to do something a little bit special on this one. We're going to put async in front of function, which makes this an asynchronous function, and you'll see why in just a second. So what we want to do now is we want to look inside of our database and look in our orders collection for any record and bring it back. So how we do that is we say const all orders equals order dot find, and we'll just put an empty object in there so it finds everything. Now this is what they call an asynchronous function, meaning that it has to go out to the internet and go to our database and pull everything and come back, and we need a way to tell the program to wait for this to finish, otherwise it'll just keep going. So we just put a wait in front of it. So it's an asynchronous function, and then we can put a wait. So what this will do is it'll let this order.find go out, find out all of our records no matter how long it takes, come back and put it inside this all orders variable before we continue on to this next line. And the last thing we need to do is we need to send back all the orders we just got to our browser, to our whoever's requesting it from our API. So we just say response.json is all orders. So send JSON back as the response, and that's going to be all orders. And what this will be is just an array of all of the order objects that it found. So that's it. That is the first endpoint that we set up. So orders, get a list of all pizza orders. So the next one we're going to do is this get of a specific order. So get info on a specific order. So what we're going to do is, again, say router dot get, and then /orders. And then a special way that you can get the ID is you do :ID, and then that's kind of a variable in the URL bar. And this, we're going to do the same thing up there, or right here as we did up there. So we'll say async function request response next. And we want to, first of all, we want to get the order ID that we want to be looking for, and that's stored inside this parameters part of the request. So we'll say const order ID equals request.params.id. So that looks inside the request object, inside the parameters, and it looks for the ID. So we typed ID right here, and it's ID right here. So that's where that's coming from. Next, we're going to look into our database in our orders collection for a record with an ID that matches the order ID that we're looking for. And we're going to wait to continue with that await command. So we'll say const the one order that we're looking for is await order.find1, and then we'll do an object, and we're looking for one with the ID, and we put this underscore before ID because that's just the way MongoDB does it, and we're looking for order ID. So we get the order ID that we're looking for, and then we send it to the database and say we're looking for this order ID, and then we wait to get it back and put it into that order, that one order constant variable. And then once we're done, we just do the same thing as above, and we send that order back in the form of JSON. So perfect, we've already finished the first two. Now we just need to post and put on orders. So if you remember posting, we'll create a new pizza order. So we need to create a new order. So we'll just do router.post, and we're going to post to orders. And this one we don't need to make an async function because we don't need to get anything back. So we'll just say function is request response next. First, what we want to do is create a new order object. And how we do that is we just say const new order equals the keyword new and then order. And then we can say new order, and we can start setting the properties. So customer, we'll say request.body.customer. So this looks inside the request function. So every time a browser or an API, the person making the API makes a request, all the data about that request will be stored inside this request function, or this request object. So this request object has a body in which there is a customer property. So we'll set all of this up on our next time when we build the React app, but we're just setting up the backend that we can receive it all. So new order dot size is what we'll do next, and request dot body dot size. New order dot toppings is request dot body dot toppings. And now we want to, if you remember inside this model, we gave it a status. So what we want to do is we want to set the new order dot status to be equal to pending, because the kitchen workers haven't started working on it yet. So as soon as we get it, so we need to mark it as pending. Then we'll say new order dot price, and we'll take the price that the API sends us, or sorry, that the React app sends us. In practice, we would actually want to calculate the price on the server so that people can't send us whatever price they want to pay. But for now, we'll just do it like this. It's simpler. And then we'll do new order dot save. So we create a new order, set all of the properties, and then we save it. And what that does is, as soon as we type save, it sends this new object that we just made to our MongoDB. And all we need to do now is we need to send our response something. So we just say send status of 200. So 200 HTTP code just means all good. There's different numbers that mean different things. A 200 means all good to go. So response.send status 200, and that will let whoever created this post request know that it worked. And now we just have one other one that we need to do, and that's orders/ID put, and that's to update an order. So we will do router.put, and we'll do orders with this :ID again, so that we know which order we're updating. And then on this one, we actually do want to do an async function again. So we'll do a request, a response, and next. So inside of here, first we need to, like we did with the post, we need to get the ID from the URL up here. So we set ID, and so we need to look inside the request, get the parameters, and get this ID. And we'll set that to order ID right there. Next, we want to look for an order with the ID of this order ID, and then update it to be whatever is in the body of our request. So it's a little bit of a funky syntax here, but we'll say say await order.update 1, and make sure you're looking at the capitals here. This is almost all the time just camel case, so the first word is lowercase, and then every word after that just is capitalized. So update 1. So we want to update one object that has the ID of order ID. So first of all, find this object and then put a comma after this object ends, so after the curly braces, and we want to update it to be whatever is inside the request.body. So that is that one, and then like we did with the other post, we just need to send back res.send status, and we'll say 200 to say that worked. And we have a wait here just to wait for this to finish before we tell it that it worked. So we are almost good to go now. There's one thing that we need to do, and it has to do with this request.body. So by default, Express, which is the web server that we're using, doesn't really know how to handle this body. We have to tell it to do something special to know what kind of body we're looking for. And that is just called middleware. So what we want to do is right here, after we set up our app as an Express and do the port, we want to add middleware. And all we do is app.use, and then we say express.json. So that means with every single request that comes in, it'll look at it and it will try and get some JSON out of the body. If we don't do this, then the body is not readable by our app. And one other thing that we're going to do right here is set up CORS. So app.use CORS, which is cross-origin resource sharing. And you put the parentheses to call it at the end right there. And this lets us use our app. This will let us access our app from our React app, which is on the same origin. And we'll see that later. So let's close our app down here in the terminal. So do Control-C and rerun it. So node app. And if everything worked right, we see Pizzilla app is listening on port 3001. So let's bring up our browser. We can see, let's go to /API/orders, and we can see an empty array, which is perfect because we don't have any orders right now. So what we want to do is actually open up Postman and test our API out here. So we open up a new tab in Postman, we can go http://localhost port 3001/API/orders. And we want to do a GET request, and we can see the same thing that we just saw in our browser. It is not getting anything because there's nothing to get, but we see the empty array brackets, which means it is working. So what we want to do actually is just send some orders to test it. So let's post to orders. You remember when we post to an order, this creates, or post to orders, it creates a pizza order. So switch that to post, come over here to body and type and click raw and switch text to JSON. So we're going to send our app some JSON, and we're going to send it first the customer name. I'll put my name, Bryce. We'll say, what were the other things? Now I'm forgetting. So we look back in our model. So our customer, we have our size, which is a number. So size will be 12-inch pizza. We have toppings, which will be an array. So maybe pepperoni and pepperoni. No, we can't have double pepperoni. Let's do olives. Comma after there. Our price quotes that we want to pay will be, this is a number, I believe, yeah, will be $12.99, and that's it. So let's send this, and we get back an OK, and over here you can see status 200 OK. So let's open up, we'll copy this URL, open up a new tab, and now it's a GET request on orders. Let's GET, and now we can see that our API is working. We successfully posted and created a new one, a new order, and now we're looking at all the orders here. And so there's an array with just one order in it. The order is for Bryce. It's currently pending, size 12, price $12.99. Here's the order timestamp. So I ordered it at this timestamp, UTC time, so 8:06, which is 1:06 a.m. here. ID is this ID that it just randomly generated for us, and then we have all of our toppings. So if we come back over here and do another order, maybe a 16-inch, send that, and then we can come back over here and test it, and we see the other one pop up. So that's great. And now we'll just do, well, let's test the other endpoints as well. So if we do slash, we can copy this ID right here. So do API/API/orders/ID. We can get just that specific pizza order as well as a put. So let's open up a new tab, change this to a put, and then we'll copy in our URL again, so localhost port 3001/API/orders, and then the ID of whatever your order is. We'll do body again as a raw JSON, and this time we're just going to be updating things. So let's update the status, which is currently pending, to complete, and hit send, and it's OK. So now if we look here, we can see status is pending. If we look at it again, it's now complete. So there you have it, a functioning REST API with a GET, POST, and PUT requests. So that is it for this section. Next time we'll be looking at creating a React API that will, or React UI that will interact with our API and let us add and update orders.